My name is Monica. I am 22 years old. I live alone in a quiet apartment overlooking Lake Michigan in Chicago. On weekdays, I work as a junior analyst at a private investment firm, a position I earned with grades and discipline, not favors, even though the company belongs to my family. From the outside, my life looks orderly and privileged. I wake before sunrise, run along the river, drink coffee that has gone cold while reading reports, and return home after dark with the same routine precision. What no one sees is how carefully I learn to organize my emotions, stacking them like files, labeling them, locking them away so they would not interfere with reason. Ethan Cole and Lucas Reed were the only exceptions. I met them when I was 4 years old, standing on a playground with scraped knees and a stubborn refusal to cry. Since then, they had been present in every version of my life, witnesses to every phase, every failure, every ambition. They knew the sound of my laughter before I learned restraint, and the silence I used when something hurt too deeply to name. For years, people called us inseparable. Teachers, neighbors, family, friends, all assumed our futures would remain intertwined, as if proximity and history were guarantees. I believed it too, until belief began to feel like obligation, and obligation slowly hardened into something suffocating. The night everything shifted was quiet. No shouting, no dramatic exit, just the soft hum of my laptop and the glow of the screen reflecting against the glass walls of my living room. I was finalizing my graduate school decision, cursor hovering over a choice that had once been made in certainty and shared promises. I changed it alone. After I confirmed the submission, relief came first, sharp and unexpected. It felt like inhaling after holding my breath for years. Then came the memory, uninvited, of a framed photograph on my desk. 3 children smiling too easily, arms tangled, unaware of how fragile forever truly is. I picked up the frame and studied it with the detachment of a stranger. The girl in the center was me, reckless and trusting. The 2 boys beside her looked certain of their place in her world. I understood then that certainty had been their greatest mistake. What I did not know yet was how much resistance my quiet decision would provoke, how quickly loyalty would be questioned, boundaries dismissed, and my autonomy treated like a misunderstanding that needed correction. That night marked the beginning of my departure, not from a city, or a school, or even from 2 men I once loved in different ways, but from the version of myself that believed endurance was the same as devotion. I closed my laptop, turned off the lights, and let the darkness settle. For the first time, it felt honest. I knew choosing myself would cost everything familiar, but it would finally give me something real at last. I did not tell Ethan or Lucas about the change immediately. I told myself that silence was temporary, that I only needed time to think. In truth, I wanted to see what would happen if I stopped explaining myself. For years I had answered every question before it was asked, smoothed every discomfort before it surfaced, carried the emotional weight of 3 people without complaint. I wanted to know who they were when I was no longer managing the balance. The answer arrived faster than expected. 2 days later, my phone lit up with messages from a group chat we had kept since high school. Ethan wrote first, precise and calm, asking why I had not confirmed my submission. Lucas followed seconds later, his tone lighter but edged with urgency, joking that I must have clicked the wrong button again. Neither asked how I felt. Both assumed a mistake. I stared at the screen longer than necessary. In that pause, something inside me shifted. I realized that my autonomy had never been real to them. It existed only as long as it aligned with their expectations. When it did not, it became an error to be corrected, a problem to be solved by collective agreement. I typed a short reply, neutral and measured, saying I had made my decision carefully. The typing bubbles appeared almost instantly. Ethan responded with concern, disguised as logic. He listed rankings, resources, proximity, all the practical reasons my original choice made sense. Lucas sent a voice message instead, his voice warm and familiar, reminding me of promises made when we were younger, of plans discussed late at night, of how we were supposed to enter the next stage together. Listening to him felt like being wrapped in a memory I had outgrown. That evening, they came to my apartment without asking. I opened the door to find them standing side by side, expressions coordinated in a way that made my chest tighten. They sat at my dining table like negotiators, not guests. Ethan spoke first, explaining that Hannah Miller would also be attending the same program, that it would be easier for everyone if nothing changed. Lucas nodded along, smiling as if reassurance could replace consent. Hannah had entered our lives quietly months earlier. She was introduced as someone in need, someone grateful, someone harmless. I had encouraged her at first, helped her adjust, defended her when she seemed overwhelmed. Somewhere along the way, her presence stopped being temporary. She was always there now, woven into conversations that no longer included me as their center. When I asked why her plans mattered more than mine, the room went still. Ethan frowned slightly, as if surprised by the question. Lucas laughed, uneasy, and said I was overthinking things. They spoke about responsibility, about fairness, about how difficult Hannah's circumstances were. No one spoke about choice. No one spoke about me. I felt something settle then, heavy and irreversible. I was not angry. I was clear. I told them that my decision stood, that I would not negotiate my future to maintain someone else's comfort. Lucas' expression cracked first. He accused me of being cold, of changing, of abandoning what we had built. Ethan remained composed, but his words sharpened, suggesting I was being unreasonable, emotional, ungrateful. They left after midnight. The apartment felt larger once the door closed, quieter in a way that felt earned. I stood by the window watching their reflections disappear into the street below. For the first time, I understood that walking away would not be dramatic. It would be slow, deliberate, and lonely. But it would be mine. I did not sleep that night. I replayed every conversation, every moment where I had mistaken familiarity for safety. It became painfully clear how often my needs had been postponed for harmony, how often I had been praised for understanding when what they truly valued was compliance. Love, I realized, had been translated into endurance and loyalty into silence. Once I saw it, I could not unsee it. The clarity was brutal but clean, cutting away illusions I had protected out of habit rather than truth. The following morning, I went to work as usual. I reviewed reports, attended meetings, answered emails with practiced efficiency. No one noticed anything different, and that anonymity felt comforting. It reminded me that my identity extended far beyond the roles I had played for others. During lunch, I drafted a list of boundaries, not to send, not to announce, but to internalize. I wrote that I would no longer explain decisions made in good faith. I wrote that access to my life was a privilege, not a right earned by history alone. Writing it felt like signing a contract with myself. By evening, the messages resumed. Lucas apologized for his tone, asked to meet, promised to listen. Ethan sent an article about long-term outcomes, framed as concern. I read them without responding. Silence, I learned, was not cruelty. It was a boundary. Each unanswered message reinforced the truth that I was allowed to step back without justifying the distance. Outside, the city moved with indifferent momentum. Inside, I prepared for the conflict ahead, knowing this was only the first fracture, not the final break. I ended the day standing before the same photograph I had nearly thrown away. This time I did not tear anything. I simply turned the frame face down and placed it in a drawer. Some memories did not need destruction. They needed distance. As I lay in bed, exhaustion finally claimed me, but my resolve remained intact. Whatever came next, accusations or regret, or attempts at persuasion, I would not retreat. This was the first night of a life redirected, and I accepted the cost without bargaining. Sleep came slowly, but certainty did not waver. I knew confrontation would follow, and loyalty would be tested. Still, I chose rest, because strength, unlike fear, grows when given space to recover and prepare myself. The pressure did not arrive all at once. It came in layers, polite at first, then persistent, then sharp enough to leave marks. Ethan shifted strategies. Logic gave way to authority. He spoke as if my choice affected a system larger than me, as if my autonomy was a loose thread that threatened to unravel something carefully constructed. Lucas went the opposite direction. He became emotional, nostalgic, unpredictable, swinging between affection and accusation within the same conversation. They stopped asking to meet and started informing me when they would arrive. One evening, I came home to find both of them waiting in the lobby of my building. Lucas leaning against the wall with forced casualness, Ethan standing straight, hands clasped like a man prepared for a hearing. I felt exposed in a way I had not before. My private space was no longer respected. My silence had been interpreted as defiance. We sat in my apartment again, the same table, the same chairs, but the dynamic had shifted. Ethan spoke first, telling me Hannah had been struggling. He said my decision had destabilized her plans, that she felt abandoned, that she was afraid. Lucas added that she had cried all night, that she blamed herself, that maybe I could reconsider for her sake. Not once did they acknowledge that I had also lost sleep, that I too was afraid, that my future was not a group project. I asked them directly when my life had become a shared asset. The question landed badly. Lucas reacted first, raising his voice, saying I was being cruel, that I had changed, that I used to care. Ethan followed with something worse. He said, caring did not mean acting selfishly. He said sacrifice was part of adulthood. He said I had always been good at that. That sentence stayed with me long after they left. I realized then that my reputation for strength had been weaponized against me. My ability to endure had been mistaken for willingness to comply. I had taught them how to treat me by never demanding better. That was my failure. And I owned it without self-hatred. Only clarity. The following week, things escalated. Hannah reached out to me directly for the first time. Her message was long and careful, filled with gratitude and subtle blame. She said she admired me, that she felt small beside me, that she never meant to cause tension. She wrote that she had no one else, that this opportunity was her only chance, that losing it would destroy her. She did not ask me to change my decision. She simply described the consequences until silence itself felt cruel. I did not reply. 2 days later, a meeting was called at work under the guise of collaboration. Ethan had arranged it. He spoke to my supervisor, framed it as concern for my focus, my stability, my commitment. Nothing overtly damaging was said, but the implication hung in the air. I felt the subtle shift in how I was perceived. Trusted, but now observed. Capable, but potentially distracted. It was a warning delivered with a smile. That night, Lucas confronted me openly. He accused me of punishing Hannah, of enjoying the power I held over her. He said I'd always liked being needed. I listened without interrupting. When he finished, I told him calmly that he was projecting his guilt onto me, that I had not asked for any of this, that I would not carry responsibility for choices that were never mine to begin with. His face hardened. He said if I continued down this path, I would lose them. He said history mattered. He said I was being unreasonable. I replied that history explained us, but it did not own me. That sentence ended the conversation. He left without saying goodbye. The breaking point came quietly. An email arrived from the university program I had originally declined. It informed me that due to changes in funding allocation, my place had been reassigned. I had expected that. What I had not expected was the follow-up message from the program I had chosen, congratulating me on my acceptance and reminding me of the independent scholarship I had earned on my own merit. I forwarded that email to Ethan and Lucas with a single line, "This is final." The response was immediate and furious. Ethan accused me of betrayal. Lucas accused me of abandonment. They said I was throwing away everything for pride. I did not answer. I packed instead. Not dramatically, not overnight, but with intention. I boxed books, archived files, donated clothes. Each item removed felt like reclaiming oxygen. When they showed up again, uninvited, I did not open the door. I spoke through it instead. I told them I loved who they had been to me, but I would not love who they were becoming. I told them my decision was not revenge, not punishment, not cruelty. It was alignment. I was choosing a life that did not require me to disappear to be accepted. They stood outside longer than necessary. I did not wait. I went to bed. In the days that followed, the narrative shifted. Mutual friends stopped calling. Stories circulated about my coldness, my ambition, my lack of loyalty. I heard them without reacting. Reputation, I learned, is often shaped by those who feel entitled to you. I refused to correct the record. Truth did not need my defense. The final message came from Ethan. It was short. He said I would regret this. I believed him in the way one believes weather forecasts. Regret was possible, but regret was survivable. What I would not survive was returning to a life where my value depended on how much I was willing to surrender. I closed the chapter that night, not with anger, but with resolve. The conflict had stripped away any remaining doubt. Whatever came next, whether isolation or consequence or unexpected freedom, I had crossed the point of no return, and for the first time since childhood, that realization felt less like loss and more like arrival. Distance did not bring peace right away. It brought exposure. Without me absorbing the friction, dynamics shifted in ways they had not anticipated. Ethan and Lucas were forced to confront a reality where consensus could not be manufactured through pressure, and loyalty could not be assumed through history alone. I watched the unraveling from a distance, not with satisfaction, but with a quiet recognition that this was inevitable. The first cracks appeared publicly. At work, Ethan's influence weakened once his narrative lost coherence. He had framed himself as rational and steady for years, but when challenged without my quiet support, impatience surfaced. Meetings grew tense. Colleagues noticed. Authority that depends on unspoken alliances collapses when one pillar steps away. I did not intervene. I did not explain. I focused on my own work, letting results speak without commentary. Lucas Spiralo Festa. He reached out repeatedly, alternating between apologies and accusations, insisting that we could fix everything if I returned to my place. Each message revealed the same fear, not losing me, but losing control of the version of the world where I stayed. I responded once, briefly, telling him that love without respect becomes possession. After that, I blocked him. The silence that followed was heavy, but clean. Hannah's presence changed too. Without me as a stabilizing comparison, her vulnerability no longer read as harmless. Others began to notice the contradictions, the subtle manipulations, the way responsibility was always redirected. Sympathy has limits when patterns emerge. The protection she relied on weakened as consequences appeared. I did not participate in her unmasking. I simply refused to be a shield. The most unexpected shift came from myself. Without constant negotiation, my energy returned in waves. I slept deeply. I focused sharply. I spoke less but meant more. When I left for my program, there were no dramatic farewells. Just a suitcase, a new apartment, and a sense of expansion that felt almost unfamiliar. Freedom, I learned, is not loud. It is spacious. Weeks later, Ethan requested a meeting. Not through others. Directly, I agreed to a public space, during daylight, with boundaries set in advance. He arrived composed but diminished, the confidence brittle around the edges. He spoke carefully, choosing words that once would have swayed me. He said he underestimated me. He said he believed he knew what was best. He said he was wrong. I listened without interruption. When he finished, I thanked him for the honesty and told him it came too late. Not because I was punishing him, but because the version of me that needed his approval no longer existed. Regret flickered across his face, real this time, unbuffered by ego. I stood, wished him well, and left. Closure does not always require reconciliation. Lucas never asked to meet again. I heard through others that he struggled, that he blamed Hannah, then Ethan, then circumstances. Growth cannot occur when accountability is outsourced. I felt sadness for him, the kind reserved for people who refuse to evolve. Compassion does not require proximity. The final realization came quietly, on an ordinary afternoon. I was reviewing a case study when it struck me that I was no longer explaining myself, even internally. Decisions came without rehearsal. Confidence no longer felt like armor. It felt like alignment. I understood then that what I had lost was not love, but dependence. What I had gained was authorship. I did not emerge victorious in the way stories often demand. There was no moment of public triumph, no applause. There was only steadiness. My reputation adjusted slowly, reshaped by consistency rather than defense. Those who truly knew me stayed. Those who preferred the compliant version drifted away. Both outcomes felt right. One evening, I received an invitation to a lecture from Alexander Pierce, someone I had met briefly through professional circles. He spoke about leadership without ownership, about partnership without erasure. I attended out of curiosity, not expectation. We spoke afterward, briefly, honestly, without pretense. There was no spark that demanded anything, only respect. I left with his card and no urgency to use it. Healing had taught me patience. Looking back, I see that the conflict was never about a program or a person. It was about consent, about whether love could exist without control and loyalty without self-abandonment. I chose the harder answer. I chose myself. Not loudly, not dramatically, but completely. If there is a lesson here, it is simple. You can be kind without being compliant. You can be loyal without disappearing. And sometimes the bravest thing you will ever do is walk away quietly, trusting that the life meant for you does not require permission from anyone who benefits from your silence. I used to believe endings were loud, that they arrived with confrontation, with tears, with someone finally admitting fault. I thought closure meant watching the people who hurt me understand exactly what they lost. I was wrong. The end of that chapter in my life came without spectacle. It came on a morning when I woke up and realized I had not dreamed about them at all. My days settled into a rhythm that did not require vigilance. I studied with focus, worked with intention, and returned home without bracing myself for messages that demanded explanation. The absence of constant negotiation felt strange at first, like a limb that had been clenched for so long it forgot how to relax. Slowly, my body remembered. My mind followed. Occasionally, memories surfaced without warning. A laugh shared on a summer night. A promise spoken with certainty that felt unbreakable at the time. I let those memories pass without judgment. They were real ones. That did not obligate me to live inside them forever. Nostalgia is not evidence. It is only proof that something existed, not that it should continue. People asked about Ethan and Lucas less and less. Their names faded from conversations, then from relevance. I learned that distance does not erase the past, but it does redefine its power. When I stopped reacting, the story lost its audience. What remained was simply my life, unfolding without commentary. I did not become harder, I became clearer. I did not close myself off to connection. I became selective about who was allowed close enough to shape me. There is a difference. Strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It is the refusal to offer it to those who treat it as leverage. One evening, months later, I stood by the river where I used to run before dawn, watching the lights reflect across the water. I thought about the girl I had been, the one who believed endurance was love and silence was maturity. I felt no embarrassment for her. She survived with the tools she had. I felt gratitude instead, because she eventually chose to grow new ones. If Ethan ever truly understood what happened, I will never know. If Lucas ever accepted responsibility, it no longer concerns me. Their journeys are their own. My peace does not depend on their insight. That realization was the final release. I'm still Monica. I am still 22 years old. I still live in Boston, still work hard, still care deeply. The difference is simple and absolute. My life no longer requires me to shrink so others can feel secure. I do not negotiate my future to preserve comfort built on my compromise. Walking away did not make me victorious. It made me honest, and honesty, I have learned, is quieter than revenge, but far more powerful. It builds a life that does not need defending. Some stories end with reconciliation. Mine ended with alignment, and that, finally, was enough.